Paul, in regard of his faith and courage, was like a cedar. He could not be stirred, but for his outward condition he was like a reed, bending every way with the wind of providence. When a prosperous gale did blow upon him, he could bend with that. I know how to be full, and when a boisterous gust of affliction did blow, he could bend in humility with that. I know how to be hungry. St. Paul was like a die that hath 4 squares. Throw it which way you will, it falls upon a bottom. Let God throw the apostle which way he would, he fell upon this bottom of contentment. A contented spirit is like a watch. Though you carry it up and down with you, yet the spring of it is not shaken, nor the wheels out of order, but the watch keeps its perfect motion. So it was with St. Paul. Though God had carried him into various conditions, yet he was not lifted up with the one, nor cast down with the other. The spring of his heart was not broken. The wheels of his affection were not destroyed, but kept their constant motion towards heaven, still content. The ship that lies at anchor may sometimes be a little shaken, but never sinks. Flesh and blood may have its fears and disquiets, but grace doth check them. A Christian, having cast anchor in heaven, his heart never sinks. A gracious spirit is a contented spirit. This is a rare art. Paul did not learn it at the feet of Gamaliel. He says, I am instructed. Philippians IV:12. I am initiated into this holy mystery, as if he had said, I have gotten the divine art. God must teach us the right art. If we should put some men to an art that they are not skilled in, how unfit would they be for it? Put a husbandman to drawing pictures. What strange work would he make? This is out of his sphere. Take a painter that is exact in laying of colors, and put him to plow, or set him to planting and grafting of trees. This is not his art. He is not skilled in it. Bid a natural man live by faith, and when all things go cross, be contented. You bid him to do what he hath no skill in. You may as well bid a child guide the stern of a ship. To live contented upon God in the deficiency of outward comforts is an art which flesh and blood hath not revealed. Nay, many of God's own children who excel in some duties of religion, when they come to this of contentment, how do they bungle? They have scarcely commenced matters of this art. Chapter 5. The resolving of some questions. For the illustration of this doctrine, I shall propound these questions. Question 1. Whether a Christian may not be sensible of his condition, and yet be contented. Answer. Yes, for else he is not a saint, but a Stoic. Rachel did well to weep for her children. There was nature. But her fault was, she refused to be comforted. There was discontent. Christ himself was sensible when he sweat great drops of blood and said, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. In Matthew XXVI 39. Yet he was contented and sweetly submitted his will. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. The apostle tells us to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, 1 Peter 5:6, which we cannot do unless we are sensible of it. Question 2. Whether a Christian may not lay open his grievances to God, and yet be contented. Answer. Yes. Unto thee have I opened my cause, Jeremiah XX:12, and David poured out his complaint before the Lord, Psalm 142:2. We may cry to God and desire him to write down all our injuries. Shall not the child complain to his father? When any burden is upon the spirit, prayer gives vent. It eases the heart. Hannah's spirit was burdened. I am, says she, a woman of a sorrowful spirit. 1 Samuel 1:15. Now, having prayed and wept, she went away and was no more sad. Only here is the difference between a holy complaint and a discontented complaint. In the one we complain to God, in the other we complain of God. Question 3. What is it properly that contentment doth exclude? Answer. There are 3 things which contentment doth banish out of its diocese, and can by no means consist with it. Number 1. It excludes a vexatious repining. This is properly the daughter of discontent. I mourn in my complaint. Psalm LV 2. He does not say I murmur in my complaint. Murmuring is no better than mutiny in the heart. It is a rising up against God. When the sea is rough and unquiet, it casts forth nothing but foam. When the heart is discontented, it casts forth the foam of anger, impatience, and sometimes little better than blasphemy. Murmuring is nothing else but the scum which boils off from a discontented heart. Number 2. It excludes an uneven discomposure. When a man saith, I am in such straits that I know not how to move or get out, I shall be undone. Head and heart are so taken up that a man is not fit to pray or meditate, etc. He is not himself. Just as when an army is routed, one man runs this way and another that. The army is put into disorder, so a man's thoughts run up and down distracted. Discontent doth dislocate and unjoint the soul. It pulls off the wheels. Number 3. It excludes a childish despondency, and this is usually consequent upon the other. A man being in a hurry of mind, not knowing which way to extricate or wind himself out of the present trouble, begins to faint and sink under it. For care is to the mind as a burden to the back. It loads the spirits, and with overloading sinks them. A desponding spirit is a discontented spirit. Chapter VI, showing the nature of contentment. Having answered these questions, I shall, in the next place, come to describe this contentment. It is a sweet temper of spirit, whereby a Christian carries himself in an equal poise in every condition. The nature of this will appear more clear in these 3 aphorisms. Number 1. Contentment is a divine thing. It becomes ours, not by acquisition, but infusion. It is a slip taken off from the tree of life and planted by the Spirit of God in the soul. It is a fruit that grows not in the garden of philosophy, but is of heavenly birth. It is therefore very observable that contentment is joined with godliness and goes along with it. But godliness with contentment is great gain. 1 Timothy VI 6. Contentment being a consequence of godliness, or concomitant, or both, I call it divine, to contradistinguish it from the contentment which a moral man may arrive at. Heathens have seemed to have this contentment, but it was only the shadow and picture of it. Theirs was but civil, this is sacred. Theirs was only from principles of reason, this is of religion. Theirs was only lighted at nature's torch, this at the lamp of Scripture. Reason may a little teach contentment as thus: whatever my condition be, this is that I am born to, and if I meet with crosses, it is but a universal misery. All have their share. Why therefore should I be troubled? Reason may suggest this, and indeed this may be rather constraint than content. But to live securely and cheerfully upon God in the abatement of creature supplies, religion only can bring this into the soul's exchequer. Number 2. Contentment lies within a man, not in the bark, but the root. Contentment hath both its fountain and stream in the soul. The beam hath not its light from the air. The beams of comfort which a contented man hath do not arise from foreign comforts, but from within. As sorrow is seated in the spirit, the heart knoweth his own bitterness. Proverbs XIV 10. So contentment lies within the soul, and does not depend upon externals. Hence, I gather that outward troubles cannot hinder this blessed contentment. It is a spiritual thing, and ariseth from spiritual grounds, namely, the apprehension of God's love. When there is a tempest without, there may be music within. A bee may sting through the skin, but it cannot sting to the heart. Outward afflictions cannot sting to a Christian's heart where contentment lies. Thieves may plunder us of our money and plate, but not of this pearl of contentment unless we are willing to part with it, for it is locked up in the cabinet of the heart. The soul which is possessed of this rich treasure of contentment is like Noah in the ark that can sing in the midst of a deluge. Number 3. Contentment is an habitual thing. It shines with a fixed light in the firmament of the soul. Contentment doth not appear only now and then, as some stars which are seen but seldom. It is a settled temper of the heart. One action doth not denominate the character. He is not said to be a liberal man who gives alms once in his life. A covetous man may do so, but he is said to be liberal who is given to liberality. Romans 12:13. That is, who upon all occasions is willing to relieve the necessities of the poor. So he is said to be a contented man who is given to contentment. It is not casual, but constant. Aristotle, in his Rhetoric, distinguishes between colors in the face that arise from passion and those which arise from complexion. The pale face may look red when it blusheth, but this is only a passion. He is said properly to be ruddy and sanguine who is constantly so. It is his complexion. He is not a contented man who is so upon an occasion, and perhaps when he is pleased, but who is so constantly when it is the habit and complexion of his soul. Chapter 7. Reasons pressing to holy contentment. Having opened the nature of contentment, I come next to lay down some reasons or arguments to contentment which may preponderate with us. Number 1. The first is God's precept. It is charged upon us as a duty, be content with such things as ye have. Hebrews 13:5. The same God who hath bade us believe hath bade us be content. If we obey not, we expose ourselves to a spiritual penalty and punishment. God's word is a sufficient warrant. It hath authority in it, and must be a sacred spell to remove discontent. He hath said it was enough among Pythagoras' scholars. Be it enacted is the royal style. God's word must be the star that guides, and his will the weight that moves our obedience. His fiat is a law, and hath majesty enough in it to captivate us into obedience. Our hearts must not be more unquiet than the raging sea, which at his word is stilled. Matthew 8:26. Number 2. The second reason enforcing contentment is God's promise. For he hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. Hebrews 13:5. Thus, God hath engaged himself under hand and seal for our necessary provisions. If a king should say to one of his subjects, I will take care of thee as long as I have any crown revenues, thou shalt be provided for. If thou art in danger, I will secure thee. If in want, I will supply thee. Would not that subject be content? Behold, God hath here made a promise to the believer, and, as it were, entered into bond for his security. I will never leave thee. Shall not this charm down the devil of discontent? Leave thy fatherless children. I will preserve them alive. Jeremiah XLIX 11. Methinks I see the godly man on his deathbed, much discontented, and hear him complaining, What will become of my wife and children when I am dead and gone? They may come to poverty. God saith, Trouble not thyself, be content. I will take care of thy children, and let thy widow trust in me. God hath made a promise to us that he will not leave us, and hath entailed the promise upon our wives and children. And will not this satisfy? True faith will take God's single bond without calling for witnesses. Be contented by virtue of a decree. Whatever our condition be, God, the great umpire of the world, hath from eternity decreed that condition for us, and by his providence ordered all appurtenances thereunto. Let a Christian often think with himself, who hath placed me here, whether I am in a higher sphere or in a lower? Not chance or fortune, as the purblind heathens imagined. No, it is the wise God who hath, by his providence, fixed me in this orb. We must act that scene which God will have us. Say not, such a one hath occasioned this to me. Look not too much at the underwheel. We read in Ezekiel of a wheel within a wheel, Ezekiel 1:16. God's decree is the cause of the turning of the wheels, and his providence is the inner wheel that moves all the rest. God's providence is that helm which turns about the whole ship of the universe. Say then, as holy David, I was dumb, because thou, Lord, didst it. Psalm XXXIX 9. God's providence, which is nothing else than the carrying on of his decree, should supersede and counterpoise. God hath set us in our station, and he hath done it in wisdom. We fancy such a condition of life good for us, whereas, if we were our own carvers, we should often cut the worst piece. Lot, being put to his choice, chose Sodom, Genesis XIII 11, which soon after was burnt with fire. Rachel was very desirous of children. Give me children, or else I die, Genesis 30:1, and it cost her life in bringing forth a child. Abraham was earnest for Ishmael. Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee, Genesis XVI 18. But he had little comfort either of him or his seed. He was born a son of strife. His hand was against every man, and every man's hand against him. The disciples wept for Christ leaving the world. They chose his bodily presence, whereas it was best for them that Christ should be gone, or else the Comforter would not come. John XVI 7. David chose the life of his child. He wept and fasted for it, 2 Samuel 12:16, whereas if the child had lived, it would have been a perpetual monument of his shame. We stand often in our own light. If we should sort or parcel out our own comforts, we should hit upon the wrong. Is it not well for the child that the parent doth choose for it? Were it left to itself, it would perhaps choose a knife to cut its own fingers. A man in a paroxysm calls for wine, which, if he had, it were little better than poison. It is well for the patient that he is at the physician's appointment. The consideration of a decree, determining, and a providence disposing all things that fall out, should work our hearts to holy contentment. The wise God hath ordered our condition. If he sees it better for us to abound, we shall abound. If he sees it better for us to want, we shall want. Be content to be at God's disposal. God sees in his infinite wisdom that the same condition is not convenient for all. That which is good for one may be bad for another. One season of weather will not serve all men's occasions. One needs sunshine, another rain. One condition of life will not fit every man, any more than one suit of apparel will fit every body. Prosperity is not fit for all, nor yet adversity. If one man be brought low, perhaps he can bear it better. He hath a greater stock of grace, more faith and patience. He can gather grapes of thorns, pick some comfort out of the cross. Everyone cannot do this. Another man is seated in an eminent place of dignity. He is fitter for it. Perhaps it is a place that requires more parts and judgment, which everyone is not capable of. Perhaps he can use his estate better. He hath a public heart as well as a public place. The wise God sees that condition to be bad for one, which is good for another. Hence, it is he placeth men in different spheres, some higher, some lower. One man desires health. God sees that sickness is better for him. God will work health out of sickness, by bringing the body of death into a consumption. Another man desires liberty. God sees restraint better for him. He will work his liberty by restraint. When his feet are bound, his heart shall be most enlarged. Did we believe this, it would give check to the sinful disputes and cavils of our hearts. Shall I be discontented at that which is enacted by a decree and ordered by a providence? Is this to be a child or a rebel? Chapter 8. Use 1. Showing how a Christian may make his life comfortable. Use 1. It shows us how a Christian may come to lead a comfortable life, even a heaven upon earth, be the times what they will, namely by Christian contentment. Proverbs XV 13. The comfort of life doth not stand in having much. It is Christ's maxim, man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. Luke XII 15. But it is in being contented. Is not the bee as well contented with sucking from a flower as the ox that grazeth on the mountains? Contentment lies within a man in the heart, and the way to be comfortable is not by having our barns filled, but our minds quiet. The contented man, saith Seneca, is the happy man. Discontent is a fretting humor which dries the brains, wastes the spirits, corrodes, and eats out the comfort of life. Discontent keeps a man from enjoying what he doth possess. A drop or two of vinegar will sour a whole glass of wine. Let a man have the affluence and confluence of worldly comforts. A drop or two of discontent will embitter and poison all. Comfort depends upon contentment. Jacob went halting when the sinew upon the hollow of his thigh shrank. So when the sinew of contentment begins to shrink, we go halting in our comforts. Contentment is as necessary to keep the life comfortable as oil is necessary to keep the lamp burning. The clouds of discontent do often drop the showers of tears. Would we have comfort in our lives? We may have it if we will. A Christian may carve out what condition he will to himself. Why dost thou complain of thy troubles? It is not trouble that troubles, but discontent. It is not the water without the ship, but the water that gets within the leak which sinks it. It is not outward affliction that can make the life of a Christian sad. A contented mind would sail above these waters, but when there is a leak of discontent open and trouble gets into the heart, then it is disquieted and sinks. Do therefore as the mariners, pump the water out and stop the spiritual leak in the soul, and no trouble can hurt thee. Chapter IX. Use 2. A check to the discontented Christian. Use 2. Here is a just reproof to such as are discontented with their condition. This disease is almost epidemical. Some, not content with their callings which God hath set them in, must be a step higher, from the plough to the throne, who, like the spider in the Proverbs, will take hold with their hands and be in kings' palaces. Proverbs XXX 28. Others from the shop to the pulpit. They would be in the temple of honor before they are in the temple of virtue. Who step into Moses' chair without Aaron's bells and pomegranates, like apes which do most show their deformity when they are climbing. Is it not enough that God hath bestowed gifts upon men in private to edify, that he hath enriched them with many mercies, but seek they the priesthood also? Numbers XVI 9. What is this but discontent arising from high-flown pride? These do secretly tax the wisdom of God, that he hath not screwed them up in their condition a peg higher. Every man is complaining that his estate is no better, though he seldom complains that his heart is no better. One man commends this kind of life, another commends that. One man thinks a country life best, another a city life. The soldier thinks it best to be a merchant, and the merchant to be a soldier. Men can be content to be anything but what God will have them. How is it that no man is contented? Very few Christians have learned St. Paul's lesson, neither poor nor rich, know how to be content. They can learn anything but this. Number 1. If men are poor, they learn to be 1. Envious. They malign those that are above them. Another's prosperity is an eyesore. When God's candle shines upon their neighbor's tabernacle, this light offends them. In the midst of wants, men can, in this sense, abound, namely in envy and malice. An envious eye is an evil eye. 2. They learn to be querulous, still complaining as if God had dealt hardly with them. They are ever telling of their wants. They want this and that comfort, whereas their greatest want is a contented spirit. Those that are well enough content with their sins, yet are not content with their condition. Number 2. If men are rich, they learn to be covetous, thirsting insatiably after the world, and by any unjust means scraping it together. Their right hand is full of bribes, as the psalmist expresseth it, Psalm XXVI 10. Put a good cause in one scale and a piece of gold in the other, and the gold weighs heaviest. There are, saith Solomon, 4 things that never say, it is enough. Proverbs XXX 15. I may add a 5th, namely, the heart of a covetous man, so that neither poor nor rich know how to be content. Never, certainly, since the creation did this sin of discontent reign, or rather rage more, than in our times. Never was God more dishonored. You could hardly speak with any, but the passion of his tongue betrays the discontent of his heart. Everyone lisps out of his trouble, and here even the stammering tongue speaks too freely and fluently. If we have not what we desire, God shall not have a good look from us, but presently we are sick of discontent, and ready to die out of a humor. If God will not give the people of Israel for their lusts, they bid him take their lives. They must have quails to their manna. Ahab, though a king, and one would think his crown lands had been sufficient for him, yet is sullen and discontented for want of Naboth's vineyard. Jonah, though a good man and a prophet, yet is ready to die in a pet. Jonah IV 8. And because God killed his gourd, kill me too, saith he. Rachel says, give me children or else I die. She had many blessings, if she could have seen them, but wanted this of content. God will supply our wants, but must he satisfy our lusts too? Many are discontented for a very trifle. Another hath a better dress, a richer jewel, a newer fashion. Nero, not content with his empire, was troubled that the musicians had more skill in playing than he. How fantastic are some that pine away in discontent for the want of those things, which if they had, would but render them more ridiculous. Chapter X. Use 3. A persuasive to contentment. Use 3. It exhorts us to labor for contentment. This is that which doth beautify and bespangle a Christian, and as a spiritual embroidery doth set him off in the eyes of the world. But methinks I hear some bitterly complaining and saying to me, Alas, how is it possible to be contented? The Lord hath made my chain heavy. Lamentations 3:7. He hath cast me into a very sad condition. Answer. There is no sin, but labors either to hide itself under some mask, or, if it cannot be concealed, then to vindicate itself by some apology. This sin of discontent I find very skillful in its apologies, which I shall first discover, and then make a reply. We must lay it down for a rule that discontent is a sin, so that all the pretenses and apologies wherewith it labors to justify itself are but the painting and dressing of a strumpet. Section 1. The first apology that discontent makes, answered. The first apology which discontent makes is this: I have lost a child. Paulina, upon the loss of her children, was so possessed with a spirit of sadness that she was near to entombing herself in her own discontent. Our love to a relation is oftentimes more than our love to religion. Answer 1. We must be content, not only when God gives mercies, but when he taketh them away. If we must in everything give thanks, 1 Thessalonians v. 18, then in nothing be discontented. Number 2. Perhaps God hath taken away the cistern, that he may give you the more of the spring. He hath darkened the starlight, that you may have more sunlight. God intends you shall have more of himself, and is not he better than 10 sons? Look not so much upon a temporal loss as a spiritual gain. The comforts of the world run dregs. Those which come out of the granary of the promise are pure and sweet. Number 3. Your child was not given, but lent. I have, saith Hannah, lent my son to the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:28. She lent him. The Lord had but lent him to her. Mercies are not entailed upon us, but lent. What a man lends, he may call for again when he pleases. God hath put out a child to thee a while to nurse. Wilt thou be displeased if he takes his child home again? Oh, be not discontented that a mercy is taken away from you, but rather be thankful that it was lent you so long. Number 4. Suppose your child be taken from you. Either he was good or bad. If he was rebellious, you have not so much parted with a child as a burden. You grieve for that which might have been a greater grief to you. If he was religious, then remember he is taken from the evil to come, Isaiah LVII 1, and placed in his center of felicity. This lower region is full of gross and hurtful vapors. How happy are those who are mounted into the celestial orbs. The righteous is taken away. In the original it is, he is gathered. A wicked child dying is cut off, but the pious child is gathered. Even as we see men gather flowers and preserve them by them, so hath God gathered thy child as a sweet flower, that he may cover it with glory and preserve it by him forever. Why then should a Christian be discontented? Why should he weep excessively? Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves. Luke XXIII 28. So could we hear our children speaking to us. Out of heaven they would say, Weep not for us who are happy. We lie upon a soft pillow, even in the bosom of Christ. The Prince of Peace is embracing us and kissing us with the kisses of his lips. Be not troubled at our preferment. Weep not for us, but weep for yourselves, who are in a sinful, sorrowful world. You are in the valley of tears, but we are on the mountains of spices. We are gotten to our harbor, but you are still tossing upon the waves of inconstancy. O Christian, be not discontented that thou hast parted with such a child, but rather rejoice that thou hadst such a child to part with. Break forth into thankfulness. What an honor is it to be a parent to beget such a child, that while he lives increaseth the joy of the glorified angels. Luke XV 10. And when he dies, increaseth the number of the glorified saints. Number 5. If God hath taken away one of your children, he hath left you more. He might have stripped you of all. He took away all Job's comforts, his estate, his children, and indeed his wife was left but as a cross. Satan made a bow of this rib, as Chrysostom speaks, and shot a temptation by her at Job, thinking to have shot him to the heart. Cursed God and died, but Job had upon him the breastplate of integrity. And though his children were taken away, yet not his graces, still he is content, still he blesseth God. Oh, think how many mercies you still enjoy, yet our base hearts are more discontented at one loss than thankful for 100 mercies. God hath plucked one bunch of grapes from you, but how many precious clusters are left behind? Objection. But it was my only child, the staff of my age, the seed of my comfort, and the only blossom out of which the honor of an ancient family did grow. Answer 1. God hath promised you, if you belong to him, a name better than of sons and of daughters. Isaiah LVI 5. Is he dead that should have been the monument to have kept up the name of a family? God hath given you a new name. He hath written your name in the book of life. Behold your spiritual heraldry. Here is a name that cannot be cut off. Number 2. Hath God taken away thy only child? He hath given thee his only son. This is a happy exchange. What needs he complain of losses that hath Christ? He is his Father's brightness, Hebrews 1:3, his fullness, Colossians 2:9, his delight, Proverbs 8:30, Is there enough in Christ to delight the heart of God? And is there not enough in Him to enrapture us with holy delight? He is wisdom to teach us, righteousness to acquit us, sanctification to adorn us. He is the joy and triumph of saints. He is all in all. Colossians 3:11. Why then art thou discontented? Though thy child be lost, yet thou hast Him for whom all things are lost. And lastly, let us blush to think that a pagan in zeal for his religion should seem to outstrip a Christian. Publius, when he was about to consecrate a temple to Jupiter, and news was brought to him of the death of his son, would not desist from his enterprise, but with much composure of mind gave orders for his decent burial. Section 2. The second apology answered. The second apology that discontent makes is, I have a great part of my estate strangely melted away, and trading begins to fail. God is pleased sometimes to bring His children very low, and cut them short in their estate. It fears with them, as with that widow who had nothing in her house save a pot of oil. 2 Kings IV2, but be content. Number 1. God hath taken away your estate, but not your portion. This is a sacred paradox. Honor and estate are no part of a Christian's jointure. They are rather accessories than essentials, and are extrinsical and foreign. Therefore the loss of these cannot denominate a man miserable. Still the portion remains. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Lamentations 3:24. Suppose one were worth $1,000,000 of money, and he should chance to lose a pin off his sleeve. This is no part of his estate, nor can we say he is undone. The loss of sublunary comfort is not so much to a Christian's portion as the loss of a pin is to $1,000,000. These things shall be added unto you. Matthew vi 33. They shall be cast in as overplus. When a man buys a piece of cloth, he hath an inch or two given in to the measure. Now though he lose his inch of cloth, yet he is not undone, for still the whole piece remains. Our outward estate is not so much in regard of the portion as an inch of cloth is to the whole piece. Why then should a Christian be discontented when the title to his spiritual treasure remains? A thief may take away all my money that I have about me, but not my land. Still a Christian hath a title to the land of promise. Mary hath chosen the better part, which shall not be taken from her. Number 2. Perhaps if thy estate had not been lost, thy soul had been lost. Outward comforts do often quench inward heat. God cannot bestow a jewel upon us, but we fall so in love with it that we forget Him that gave it. What a pity is it that we should commit idolatry with the creature. God is forced sometimes to drain away an estate. The plate and jewels are often cast overboard to save the passenger. Many a man may curse the time that ever he had such an estate. It hath been an enchantment to draw away his heart from God. Some there are that will be rich, 1 Timothy vi 9, and they fall into a snare. Art thou troubled that God hath prevented a snare? Riches are thorns, Matthew 13:7. Art thou angry that God hath pulled away a thorn from thee? Riches are compared to thick clay, Habakkuk 2:6. Perhaps thy affections, which are the feet of the soul, might have stuck so fast in this golden clay that they could not have ascended up to heaven. Be content. If God bank up our outward comforts, it is that the stream of our love may run faster another way. Number 3. If your estate be small, yet God can bless a little. It is not how much money we have, but how much blessing. He that often curseth the bags of gold can bless the meal in the barrel and the oil in the cruse. What if thou hast not the full flesh pots, yet thou hast a promise, I will bless her provision, Psalm CXXXII 15. And then a little goes a great way. Be content. Thou hast the dew of a blessing distilled. A dinner of green herbs, where love is sweet. I may add, where the love of God is. Another may have more estate than you, but more care. more riches, less rest, more revenues, but withal more occasions of expense. He hath a greater inheritance, yet perhaps God doth not give him power to eat thereof. Ecclesiastes vi. 2. He hath the dominion of his estate, not the use. He holds more, but enjoys less. In a word, thou hast less gold than he, perhaps less guilt. Number 4. You did never so thrive in your spiritual trade. Your heart was never so low, as since your condition was low. You were never so poor in spirit, never so rich in faith. You did never run the ways of God's commandments so fast, as since some of your golden weights were taken off. You never had such trading for heaven all your life. You did never make such adventures upon the promise, as since you left off your sea adventures. This is the best kind of merchandise. O Christian, thou never had such incomes of the Spirit, such springtides of joy, and what, though weak in estate, if strong in assurance? Be content. What you have lost one way, you have gained another. Number 5. Be your losses what they will, in this kind, remember, in every loss there is only a suffering, but in every discontent there is a sin, and one sin is worse than 1,000 sufferings. What? Because some of my revenues are gone, shall I part with some of my righteousness? Shall my faith and patience go too? Because I do not possess an estate, shall I not therefore possess my own spirit? O learn to be content.